This episode of the All About Pigeons podcast is brought to you by the Champions United One Loft Race. Champions United is a one loft racing event that brings pigeons from multiple breeders together in a single loft, giving every bird a fair chance to compete in a series of exciting races. Birds are trained and released under the same conditions, making it a true test of speed, homing ability, and consistency. Whether you're a seasoned racer or simply love watching pigeons excel, Champions United is a great way to experience competitive racing. Visit championsunitedoneloftrace.com to learn more, follow race updates, and connect with this passionate racing community. Welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast, brought to you by the All About Pigeons nonprofit organization, which is dedicated to promoting education and promotion of the pigeon hobby. Every week, a listener requests to drive our conversations about all things pigeons. Join me, Philip Fry, as we learn and share stories about these incredible birds and this ancient hobby. Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the state of racing pigeon clubs and the Pigeon Racing Club revival. With us we have Janet Dame, a member of the Columbus Racing Pigeon Club. So Janet, thanks so much for coming on and talking with us.
Glad to be here.
Can you give us your background with pigeons and how you got into pigeons and racing specifically?
I had lived in East Tennessee. I had exotic birds. We belonged to an exotic bird club. One of the members came down with terminal cancer and got rid of all of his birds except his pigeons. He called me and asked me to take them. And back then I was like everyone else, rats with wings, don't want anything to do with pigeons. But he said, these are special pigeons. He had white homing pigeons and he was doing dove releases at the time. He mostly wanted me to take them because he knew that I would take care of them. So I agreed because it was kind of his last wish that his pigeons be taken care of. I knew nothing about pigeons. So I started doing some research, and the more I looked into it, the more amazed I was that how intelligent these birds are, how resilient they are. I got the white pigeons. We did some dove releases, but the more I got into it, the more I realized that I wanted to race. That didn't happen for 20 years. I've only been racing for about 5 years. It is absolutely a passion with me.
I do white dove releases too, and really white dove releases, it's a lot like racing. You're training your birds and everything else, and it's right along those same ways, and they are homers.
I trained my white homing pigeons, the dove release pigeons, the same way that I trained my racing pigeons.
Okay, yeah.
We went on training tosses, and the only difference was I didn't take them any farther than 40 or 50 miles for a training toss.
I think with my white doves, it's the same thing. I do most of the releases in the nearby towns, so I'm not having to do 100
Hmm.
mile tosses and stuff like that.
Exactly, exactly.
So when it comes to pigeon club racing, you definitely here in the States, at least, there is a decline. In some areas, there are some clubs that are doing good, but I'd say, overall, there is a decline in it. From your perspective, what would you say are like the biggest factors that are contributing to the decline in the pigeon race clubs?
I think one of the biggest ones, at least for the smaller clubs, is that the members are getting older. I think probably the average age of a pigeon racer in a club is probably 50 years old or plus. I think the cost of the equipment and building materials and things like that has a big part of it. Just the public's general lack of knowledge about pigeon racing. Every time I take a pigeon on a toss, I have somebody tell me that they had no clue there was any such thing as racing pigeons. So, but I think probably the biggest thing is just people are getting older and no new people are coming in.
You see that also in the show side too, with the fancy hobby. A lot of the specialty
Hmm.
breeds clubs are kind of aging out in a way. And then economic, like you're talking about the cost to build a loft now. Building lofts
Hmm.
isn't cheap. Even just buying crates, feed, all that, that
Right.
definitely plays a big role in it right there. I mean, that's kind of strange though, because you hear a lot about, oh, my grandfather raised pigeons and I raised pigeons and my dad had pigeons and kind of stays in the family with a lot of that. But so even with these old time pigeon racers, it's not continuing on in those families then.
Yeah, I think families as a whole we've got the cell phones and the computers and things like that. And I think The technology's taken a big bite out of pigeon racing and the pigeons in general in the clubs. It's hard to compete with a kid on a video game as opposed to walking outside to clean a pigeon loft. So, I think technology's taken a big bite out of it. Like you said, the building materials, the cost of building a loft. Now, even the little starter lofts that they show on the American Racing Pigeon Union website is the first time I saw it. I think you could build it for about $800 or $900, and now it's probably twice that.
Yeah, that's significant. There's definitely competition for getting the attention of the youth right now.
Definitely.
Basically, they're just not coming into the clubs. The youth membership is just not there. There's no youth involvement that's filling in the places of these older people that are aging out.
Right, right. I try to do presentations at local schools just to see what goes on. Now, the kids are interested, but then, we go home and tell mom, well, mom, I want to raise pigeons. And mom and dad are like, no, I don't think so.
That's a really good point, though, right there. I mean, you really do got to get the parents on board.
Yeah, you do. And that's the difficult part. With most homes, both parents are working now. We're fighting a lot of different things there that aren't conducive to racing pigeons.
Yeah, HOAs and whatnot too. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely.
So outside of youth, let's just say like, you got a middle-aged person coming into the hobby. What are some of the barriers or, obstacles that are making it difficult just for newcomers who want to get involved with racing or just join a racing club and get started that way?
I think for an adult coming in, I think it's probably again back to cost of what it costs to get set up and started. The price of the loft, the price of the clocks. We're looking at possibly changing to different clocks in our club because the system that we're using now is outdated and no longer being manufactured. So we're talking about, you know, anywhere from $1,300 up uh, to replace the clocks. And when you get people our age on fixed incomes, that's difficult. You get a younger person, even someone that has children or house payment, things like that. The cost of a loft and the cost of a clock alone are enough to kind of set people back.
The clocks alone are really expensive, even coming across a
Mm-hmm.
used one.
Yeah, exactly.
Something you have to have though. Like you say, you got to be compliant with, how you're racing and everyone has to be on the same
Hmm.
page. Out of all these different things that we've just discussed right here, as far as the club racing that's contributing to, the possible decline overall, what are some of the success that you have seen in getting new members and more importantly, keeping them, retaining those members?
Our club is down to 5 members, and I think we kind of need to revamp a little bit, get more publicity out there for one, about racing, retaining members. Having just basically started in racing, one of my biggest obstacles was not knowing which way to go or which way to train or what to do with a racing pigeon as opposed to a homing pigeon. I had some really nice people in the club, but they play their cards close to their chest. They don't really want to share anything. I can remember asking one fellow, what to look for in a good racing pigeon, and he said, "Well, you just race it, and if it does okay, it's a good pigeon." So, you know,
Nice.
I think people need to be a little more forthcoming with how they do things, and I try to do that when I talk to people. I don't try to keep secrets. I may forget to tell you something, but if you ask me a question specifically about a particular bird, I'll give you my opinion. So I think we just need more mentoring.
Yeah, with competition and stuff like that, that does go on sometimes for sure. In almost any aspect of the hobby. Anytime
Hmm.
there's real stiff competition, everyone's gonna tell you what they want to tell you and then kind of keep some stuff to themselves, which is unfortunate. It's like if we're all trying different things and doing what works, then that makes healthier birds, faster birds, all
Right.
across the board. Raising tide raises all boats, and everybody benefits that way. And I think the fact that, this is my opinion, I think the fact that pigeon racing still is kind of unknown and they still have a pretty terrible reputation to kind of fight back. That could actually be played to an advantage in some ways. So you've been on the news before talking about pigeons, and they all, oh, I had no idea, rats with wings. I had no idea about the racing and the
Right.
history and everything else. So I do think that like having that could be an advantage in the sense that any pigeon fancier, any pigeon fancier could literally contact their local news station and do some serious promoting that way. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to get that set up and do that and really promote the sport in that way?
The local news station here in Columbus has a segment where they do military matters, and I contacted the station on the 4th of July, I think, told them what I was doing, and they seemed kind of interested. So they called me in and said, bring your pigeons and come talk about pigeons. So I did. And, I try to do that with, like I said, with the schools and with anybody that'll listen. I try to get them out there. We did a Veterans Day last year, I believe. We did a thing with the library in Opelika, which is 30 miles from here, where I set up a display about war pigeons and things that they'd done during World War One and World War Two. And we had people from Fort Benning coming by and said, I didn't know this about pigeons. They didn't know that pigeons had been used in the war. They didn't know that Fort Benning had a pigeon loft back in the 1950s, just before they mustered them all out. But people that, you know, soldiers and people that worked there had no clue that there was ever a pigeon loft on Fort Benning.
Those are both great avenues for advertising because you're not doing it inside of a pigeon community. You're doing it out in the public, like a public library. Anybody can walk in there. Obviously on the news, that's a great reach that you're making right there. You're really getting that out there in front of a lot of different people. So I think that's another aspect too. And anybody can do that. If you have pigeons and you have the ability, the time to do something like that, you can really help the sport and hobby just by getting it out there.
It is. We were going to do one this year at Tractor Supply, but we were all fighting the colds and the crud going around, and it was 20 degrees here in Alabama, believe it or not. So we had to cancel that. But we do have plans to do another one there at Tractor Supply, and that's a kind of a local. Everybody goes to Tractor Supply on Saturdays, so hopefully we'll be able to get a few more people interested.
Yeah. So let's shift gears here a little bit. And one of the things we wanted to cover here was talking about the use of routine antibiotics. And if anybody gets any kind of pigeon magazine from, the various pigeon supply companies, they're packed. And I get it, sometimes you get a sick pigeon and maybe a few sick pigeons and you're kind of freaking out and you're flipping through there trying to find something that will help your bird. But the amount of different things that you could just give your birds on a constant basis is wild. It's almost never ending. There's a big old list of that. So how common do you think the routine use of antibiotics really is? And what would be the issues with that in your opinion?
I think it's much more common than it should be. I'm a retired emergency room nurse. One of the problems that we had saw frequently in the ER was antibiotic resistant diseases, infections, and things. And that comes from the misuse of antibiotics, taking them when you don't need them, taking the wrong kind, not taking them long enough, that kind of thing. And they're doing the same thing with pigeons. If they're not sick, they don't need the antibiotic. If you have one or two sick, don't treat the whole flock. Pull the sick bird and treat it, but know what you're treating. Your bird has a virus, antibiotics are not going to do any good for it. If you're giving your bird routine antibiotics, you're not only destroying whatever bacteria you're trying to get rid of, but you're also killing the good bacteria. You're destroying the bacteria in their gut, which helps process the food that they eat. It helps synthesize vitamins. It even helps the immune system fight off, microbacteria. Just routinely giving antibiotics is not a good idea. And I think you're going to end up with superbugs. You're going to end up with pigeons that don't have good immune systems. If they're not processing their food properly, then you're going to have birds that are not nutritionally sound. So that's going to affect their racing abilities.
So do you think that this common use of antibiotics is connected to some of these performance declines or some of these outbreaks of, different diseases that are going around?
I do. Like I said, if it's going to affect their gut bacteria, it's going to affect how they process their food. If they're not processing their food properly, then they're not feeding their muscles and the rest of their bodies. So they're not going to perform if they're not nutritionally sound.
Before breeding season, or yeah, before young bird racing season, definitely like before breeding season, let's say that there's a lot of fanciers that will have a routine of, I'm going to put birds on this. And it might not always be antibiotics. It might even be just like an electrolyte boost. What do you think about like routine stuff like that?
I know a lot of fellows that will routinely run their breeders through several antibiotics before breeding season. But again, you're affecting how they absorb their food. You're killing off the good bacteria, which helps fight off the bad bacteria. So you're not doing your birds any service there. Have your bird do cultures. Most vets can run a culture to see if there's a bacteria or a fungus or something in your birds and treat for that, but don't just routinely treat with antibiotics. Even people shouldn't just routinely take antibiotics. You don't see a person that runs a marathon. They don't take antibiotics before the marathon just in case. They don't take them after the marathon just in case they were exposed to something. Why do that to your bird? That's just my humble nursing opinion.
Well, even like you said though, too, and I've heard this a couple of different times where don't do flock treatments. Like if you do have an issue, pull the bird or birds
Mm-hmm.
and treat those individual birds. Find out what they have and treat those individual
Right,
birds for that symptom.
right. You'll have a lot less problems with your birds, I think. I haven't used antibiotics in probably 6 years now. I had one, I took in a rescue bird that it was a racing pigeon, but it was somebody found it in their yard. The owner didn't want it back. I normally quarantine a rescue bird, a bird that I don't know. I normally quarantine him for 45 days, but this one I did not. I quarantined it for 10 days. It looked okay. So I threw it in with my flock and I ended up losing about 15 birds. If it's a rescue bird, especially if it's from a one loft race, I will quarantine that bird for 45 days.
That's a long quarantine, yeah.
When we belonged to the clubs with the exotic birds, they had a program then called Model Aviary Program, and their recommendation was to quarantine birds for 45 days. Now we're talking parrots and cockatiels and things like that, but I do that with rescue birds, because, especially one-off birds, because you have birds coming in from other countries, not just the United States.
Right.
If it's a club bird from locally, then I'll quarantine it for 14 days. But if it's from out of state, I'll quarantine it for 45. And that's, to some that's a little excessive, but I haven't lost birds in a while. So
You can't over quarantine. You can definitely under quarantine though.
yes, you can. So, and some of this comes from just, my nursing brain.
Advice for anybody coming into the racing and they're getting breeders and they're getting some young birds ready to start. What would be like a sustainable health loft management setup and system that you would recommend to them?
What I do is with my young birds that I breed, I give them a cilantro tea. And I read about it in the Racing Pigeon Digest magazine. I don't know who the article was by, but the fellow said this worked for him. So I thought it's not going to hurt the birds. So let's try it. And it really does make a difference in my young birds. If they're a little fluffed up, if they're just not, if they just look a little off, I'll give them that cilantro tea. When I first put them in the loft by themselves, when I take them away from mom and daddy, I'll give them the cilantro tea for a couple of days, and whatever is in the cilantro, it just kind of gives them a boost. And then I don't sterilize my loft, but I keep it clean. I scrape the floor. I have wooden floors, and I scrape the floors every couple of days, mostly to keep it looking nice because we live in a subdivision, and I don't want the rats with wings and dirty birds routine going around. So I try to keep it tidy, but I don't sterilize my loft. let the kids play in the dirt. It builds their immunity. And then just good food. They can tolerate the cold. My loft, the whole front of my loft is open, good ventilation, healthy birds to begin with, clean water. My water containers, I do sterilize at least a couple of times a week, especially in the heat down here. I think you'll get more bacteria buildup and nasty things growing in your water then. So I do sterilize my water containers, but not the rest of the loft. And just don't overcrowd. I think that's the hardest one for everybody to follow.
Yep. And so another subject that if especially if anybody is on any of the pigeon Facebook groups, it almost doesn't matter what pigeon Facebook group you're on, rolling, fancy, racing, whatever.
Mhm.
Eventually someone's going to take a picture of a bird and say, "Hey, this bird just showed up and I think it's lost. It has a ring on its foot." So there's always these lost and found pigeons that are getting posted all over. And in the Racing Pigeon Digest, there's been a couple of different articles over the years about just increasing number in lost birds. Curious as to what you think that might be, why so many birds are not being able to return home, and we're seeing some more of these lost and found birds.
I think we're seeing more on social media just because it's social media. But I think we're having more issues with lost birds. And again, this is just my humble nursing opinion because so many birds are inbred. People are breeding birds that haven't been raised, but they have the pedigree behind them. So they just assume that they're going to be good birds and they're going to make good babies and they're all going to come home and they're not. Just because you breed two champions doesn't mean that the whole litter is going to be a champion. So I think they're probably breeding. They're breeding for the name instead of what the bird can do. Irish setters used to be excellent bird dogs, but now they're not. They can't find anything, let alone a bird. And they were bred for beauty. They were bred for the pretty fur and conformation. And I think we're kind of doing that with the racing pigeons in a way. We're breeding for that pedigree, that name on that pedigree, as opposed to what that bird can actually do. We're seeing more losses because of that. We're breeding out those natural instincts.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you're obviously not gonna fly a very expensive pair of breeders that you just bought, so you won't really know what they can do. So you're going completely off of the
Mm-hmm.
pedigree, what the theoretically what they've done, but not necessarily what they can produce.
Right. And you may get lucky and you may win some races with it, but I think your overall success is going to be from being as natural as possible. I don't pair my birds according to whose name is on the pedigree. I put them all in the loft together and I let them pick their own mate because nature has a way of that bird knows better than we do how strong that other bird is.
Yeah,
That's going to be the better pair as opposed to putting these two birds together because they have the same name on the pedigree.
that's spoken like a true club racer right there. I mean, that's something that when I interview people who do a lot of one loft racing compared to club
Mhm.
racing, club racers are all about results. Say
Mhm.
what you want to
Mhm.
say, show me all the paperwork, but if I release these 20 birds, whoever gets there first, that's the bird they're going to keep their eye on, sort of a thing. Whereas
Right.
a lot of the times with these one loft races, it almost is kind of like a business investment where, okay, I spent this much, but this is, a really great bird and I could win this much with it in that way. And it's kind of all on paper,
But how do you know that's a really great bird?
right?
I mean, if you haven't seen that bird race, how do you know that's a really great bird? He's got really great parents. He's got really great grandparents, even. But that may not be a really great bird, and you don't know that if you've never raced it. But like you said, you want to put, a $1,500 bird out there for the hawk to chase
Right. Yeah. Just to see. Yeah.
just to see how well he's going to do. Uh, so you got to pick your poison, I guess, would be the best way to put it.
So when it comes to kind of limiting losses for clubs and stuff, would you just say that it's a matter of training issues, like maybe a lot more shorter tosses in the beginning and pulling back that way, or what would you say would be a good way to help with eliminating losses in the sense of club racing?
I think it starts with the individual trainer. If I only train my birds 30 miles and you train yours 60 and you do it more regular than I do, your chances of you getting more birds back are higher. But then I think that the clubs need to try training tosses together, just like they're going on a race, but it's strictly training. I think it teaches the birds to travel in the trailer. I think it teaches them to adjust to new pigeons because you're taking them out of their flock and everything they know and sticking them in with pigeons they don't know. And they're, they have a structure in their flock just like chickens or turkeys or anything else does. And I think club training runs would help. They had smash pigeon races long before 4G and cell phone towers and things like that. So who knows what it is. I tend to watch the solar weather. If the KP index is high, I don't like to fly my birds. I loft fly, but I don't take them down the road if the KP is over 5. I have seen myself lose more birds if the KP index is high as opposed to not.
This was a year or so ago. They had a all about solar activity, and then they put
Mm-hmm.
that next to a map of races that were going on. It was an article in the Racing Pigeon Digest a few years ago, and it was about solar activity lined up with a chart of losses. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like hand in hand, like when there was a lot of solar activity, losses were higher to the point where it
Right.
was more than a coincidence. It was pretty interesting. So definitely that's a good one to watch.
Well, I had a total of 80 birds. And once my young birds are flying well and kind of keeping up with the older birds, I'll take them on tosses together. So I took 80 birds about 40 miles from here, and this was not their first long run. They had been doing 35 up to that point. I took 40 birds out. When I let them go, I noticed that they had circled much longer than normal. When I got home, the birds weren't home, which again was very unusual. 2 hours later, I only had one bird back. And I
Oh
came in and
wow.
looked, and the KP index was like 7. I lost 40 birds that day.
Oh no. Wow.
But yeah, it was. So I watch the KP index now.
So have you ever been contacted by anybody? Do you have your number on the bands, or are they just ARPU bands?
There are club bands.
Okay. Have you ever been contacted about anybody finding any of your pigeons?
Yes. Matter of fact, one of the ones that I let go on that day, I have some family in Lakeland, Florida, and my cousin's name is Lori. So I get a phone call and it pops up on my phone and it's Lori and same spelling, same last name is spelled the same way. And she says, "So are you into racing pigeons?" And I said, "Lori, you know I race pigeons." And she said, "Oh, well, we've got one of your pigeons down here." And I said, "No, you don't. They're in Lakeland, Florida." And she said, "Yeah, we do. My daughter and I have been feeding it all day long." And I said, "You have one of my racing pigeons in Florida?" "Yes." And she gave me the band number, and it was one of my racing pigeons. So one of the birds that I had turned loose that day, the KP index was so high, he had to fly over my loft and ended up in Florida. She said, "If we can catch him, we'll bring him back to you." They were feeding him peanuts and pistachios.
Oh, hey, nice.
They were down there. Yeah, he was so fat when he got back. uh, they were on vacation in Florida and they were coming back this way. So when they went home, they brought him back to me. But yeah, it was really funny because for the longest time I thought it was my cousin, just her and her brother, just playing a joke on me. But it was indeed one of my birds had flown to Florida.
Wow. How far away was she from you?
Well, let's see, Phoenix City, Lakeland, Florida. I think we counted it up, and he overflew the loft by over 200 miles.
Oh, wow.
And he was a young bird, so it was, he just wanted warmer weather, I guess.
Wow. That's a big overshot.
That was a big overshot. We're not sure how he got there, but he went to Florida.
I feel like most of the time, because people are posting on Pigeon Facebook groups and stuff, most of the time their advice is pretty good about just, if you can catch it, get the band number, and if it's, if it says ARPU on it, you can clearly just call them and sort it out that way. But would you say that's pretty much the good advice to give to the general public whenever they come across a lost pigeon with a band on it?
Well, regardless of the band, most pigeons, it says AU on it. It's going to be American Racing Pigeon Union. The ARPU is those bands have been bought directly from the American Racing Pigeon Union. Our club bands, we buy them from AU, but they say CGA on them. So anytime you find a pigeon with a band, you can call American Racing Pigeon Union. If it's not one of their bands, they can probably tell you which organization to find the owner from.
Oh, right, yeah, because they'll have all the clubs and everything else underneath them too.
Right now, if when the one loft races are in progress, then you have birds with bands from all over the world. I've actually found a bird from, I think we found several had been brought back to me from the Netherlands. So, China, Mexico, there's bands from all over. So, but the American Racing Pigeon Union can sometimes tell you where to start looking for it.
So obviously we're always trying to fight the misconception of, rats with wings and
Hmm.
get people to understand the history we've had with them, all the different breeds, all the different ways that people compete with them. Racing is a big part, probably one of the older ones too. So can you talk about how every member, right? Because it always seems like there's always a couple of members in a club that are kind of, and maybe that's the role they're given. Maybe they're a publicity director, so everyone else is like, well, they're handling it. But what about something that all individual members can do, even if it's a little thing? What are some things that individual club racing members can do, just kind of better educate the public and promote the pigeon hobby in a positive way?
When I do my tosses, I try to do it where it's, of course, safe for the birds, but where it's kind of in a public area. And most always, someone will come up and ask me what I'm doing. I also invite people to come and see my loft. And I don't, because of diseases and things like that, I don't let anybody in the loft. But I have some special birds that I'll go in and bring out, especially if there's kids around, and let the kids touch the birds. But invite people, friends, neighbors, you know, the guy that put the groceries in your car. And I know nowadays you have to be careful who you invite to your home, but invite people to come and see your birds is the biggest thing. People from your church, people from your office, people that you know. See if you can get them interested in it. It's people just don't have any clue what these birds can do.
As a pigeon fancier, you're always known as like the pigeon person in your group of people. So invite them over and show them
Mhm.
what it's all about. And absolutely, maybe they can catch the pigeon bug.
Definitely, definitely. There's a fellow that I talked to. He reached out to me through one of the Facebook pages, and he's got it bad now. He's already expanded his loft.
When you start getting too many pigeons, you just got to build another loft, right?
Exactly, and that's what I tell him. When you build your loft, make sure you have room to expand. So I started with my first racing loft was 8 by 10, 12 by 10, and then within 6 or 7 months we added another one the same size. And then when we moved down here from Northwest Indiana, we brought 100 of the pigeons with us, and we bought a 12 by 20. It was originally designed as a gazebo, and I called the guy and I said, "Look, we need to make some adjustments here." So they redesigned their gazebo and brought it out to us. And then last year we added another 10 foot onto it, so it's 30 by 12.
Just keeps growing.
And I could use another 10 foot. So
Yeah, that all sounds right.
yeah, leave room to expand.
So, is there any one piece of advice or maybe even just anything that you would like to say to club racers or pigeon racers in general?
New people, listen to everybody, watch all the videos, read all the books, learn everything you can, but form your own opinion. What works for one guy doesn't always work for the other. So, I don't flip flop with with different techniques. If what I'm doing is not getting results, I'll try something new, but I'll always try it for 6 or 7 months before I stop or go to something new. Don't Consistency is the key with any animal, and pigeons are no different with that. And for clubs, get out there in the public, get your birds out in public, and go to schools and go to anybody that'll stand and listen to you talk about your pigeons. Let people know that these birds are not rest with wings, that they are incredible athletes. They're therapists, they're pets, they're just amazing athletes. Get them out there.
Yeah, well, great advice. Anybody wants to check out the race club that she's a part of, they do have a Facebook, the Columbus Racing Pigeon Club. That's out of Columbus, Georgia, not Columbus, Ohio. It's Columbus Racing Pigeon Club. They do have a Facebook page, so you can check out the race club on the Facebook. So, Janet, I really appreciate everything you said and coming on the show and talking with us. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, it is. I appreciate it.
This episode of the All About Pigeons podcast is brought to you by the Champions United One Loft Race. Champions United is a one loft racing event that brings pigeons from multiple breeders together in a single loft, giving every bird a fair chance to compete in a series of exciting races. Birds are trained and released under the same conditions, making it a true test of speed, homing ability, and consistency. Whether you're a seasoned racer or simply love watching pigeons excel, Champions United is a great way to experience competitive racing. Visit championsunited1loftrace.com to learn more, follow race updates, and connect with this passionate racing community. Thank you for listening to another ad-free, listener-requested episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. If you like the show and want to help it keep it going, as well as supporting your other pigeon promotional work, head to the website PigeonPod, that's pigeonpod.com. You can make a donation there. If you can't make a donation today, support the show by giving us a good 5-star review wherever you're listening to us at right now. That really helps the podcast and helps the algorithm get us out there to other people who might not know about Pigeon Podcast. If you have any episode requests, upcoming pigeon shows, competition results, or you want to be a guest on the show and just talk about some pigeons, or you have a shout out for a friend, shoot us an email at staff@pigeonpod.com. Thanks again for listening. We really appreciate your support. And remember, together the hobby thrives. Support each other and enjoy your pigeons.